So, I recently dealt with something I never thought I'd say out loud. My property got raided by cops. And the reason? An HOA dispute. They showed up in vests with guns and a clipboard that looked official, except every part of it was fake. Funny thing is, they thought they were setting the trap. Turns out, they walked straight into mine. Before we dive in, where are you listening from today? Ever chase a dream so long that by the time you finally get it, you don't even trust it? That was me, sitting on a porch I built, sipping coffee grown on someone else's land, looking out at 120 acres of freedom I paid for in sweat and scars. No bosses, no 4 a.m. calls, no strangers yelling in my face, just me, my dogs, my goats, a tractor older than some of my bones, and silence. Not the kind that makes you uneasy, but the kind that makes your nervous system uncoil. The kind that whispers, "You're home." So yeah, when I bought this ranch in Simmons Valley, I thought I was done with conflict. I thought wrong. It started with a sign, white plastic, zip-tied to my fence like it belonged there. Notice, property under review, Simmons Valley HOA. Compliance required. I stood there for a full minute, blinking at it like it might explain itself. It didn't. So I ripped it down, tossed it in the fire barrel, and chalked it up to some bored kids playing HOA cosplay. That was mistake number one, underestimating how far someone will go when they think a clipboard gives them power. Mistake number two, assuming Karen would stop. The next day, she showed up, SUV the color of hospital walls, parked halfway across my gravel like it was a tactical formation. Out stepped a woman in pastel pink, pressed khakis, and mirrored sunglasses, clipboard tucked like a sidearm under one arm. She didn't look at my land. She looked at me like I was a problem to be solved. "Hi there," she chirped, like we were about to exchange banana bread recipes. I wiped my hands on a rag and leaned against the fence post. "Help you?" "I'm Karen Simmons, HOA president. Just doing my rounds. Thought I'd personally welcome you to the neighborhood." I blinked. "HOA?" She smiled wider. "Simmons Valley Homeowners Association. We're a chartered community coalition focused on maintaining visual and environmental standards across properties." I laughed. "This is farmland. The only visual standard out here is not crashing into cows." She didn't flinch. "Our bylaws cover fencing height, structure types, livestock ratios, and noise thresholds. We're currently in an awareness phase, but citations will begin at the end of the month." "Lady," I said, "you can't cite a goat." "Oh, we don't cite the goats," she said sweetly. "Just their owners." She handed me a manila envelope labeled "Welcome Packet, Action Required." Before I could reply, she spun on her orthopedic heel and walked off like she'd just dropped off a jury summons. I opened it right there. Page after page of fake regulations, diagrams of my barn, red-circled photos of my fencing from angles I didn't even know existed. Apparently, my satellite dish was visible from the southern view corridor, constituting a visual obstruction. I didn't throw it out. I burned it. 2 days later, new signs appeared. Bigger, laminated, zip-tied higher. One stapled to my barn door. "Under enforcement review. Violations pending." I tore them down again. This time, they came back with nails and not just signs. Men. 2 of them, late 30s, matching khakis. Vests with iron-on patches that read HOA Patrol. I watched from the porch as they walked my fence line with walkie-talkies and clipboards, like they were on a mission. One pointed at my tractor and muttered into his mic. I stepped off the porch. They froze like deer at the sound of a shotgun. "Something I can help you with, boys?" One spoke, nervous, rehearsed. "We're conducting a compliance sweep under HOA protocol." I walked closer. "Got a badge?" "We operate under the Simmons Valley Charter." "Great. Then you're trespassing under the Callahan Property Charter. Leave." They did, but one dropped his clipboard. Inside, Patrol maps, routes, properties marked with red X's. Mine was labeled Alpha, High Resistance. I took a photo and called a buddy in town, a sheriff's deputy named Langston. He hadn't heard of any HOA, but had heard of Karen. "Oh yeah," he said. "She tried to find the feed store last year, called it a rural noise disturbance." That's when I realized this wasn't a one-time thing. Karen had plans that didn't stop at laminated signs, plans that included men with walkie-talkies, fake websites, patrols, and maybe worse. I started prepping. Not for war, for nonsense, motion sensors, trail cams, remote lights. Nothing lethal. Just enough to remind them this land bites back. Because the next time they crossed my line, they weren't walking away with a warning. And the next time they came, they didn't knock. They came before dawn in silence, and they brought backup. But they didn't know. They just walked into a place where I write the rules. You don't forget what it sounds like when trouble's trying to be quiet. There's a specific rhythm to it, measured, almost careful, like a heartbeat, just a tick too fast. I heard it before I saw anything. The wind was dead, sky still black, chickens not even arguing yet. But that crunch on the gravel, too heavy to be wind, too light to be a truck, too coordinated to be a deer. I didn't panic, just grabbed my boots and a mug half full with yesterday's reheated coffee, muscle memory. I didn't have to look. I already knew. They were back. Fake HOA troops, Karen's clipboard commandos. I'd figured they'd try again, just not this soon. I stepped into the kitchen, flicked off the interior lights, quieted my breathing, and listened. Crunch, pause, crunch, multiple, 5, maybe 6. I moved to the side window, out by the barn. 5 shadows moved in a lazy arc, flashlights off, radio earpieces in, vests, khakis. One guy had a clipboard, because apparently even paramilitary LARPers need paperwork. The kicker. They had headlamps now, strapped to their foreheads like coal miners or discount special forces. I crouched low and scanned. 3 veered toward the east fence, where Linda the goat slept like royalty. 2 hung near the front gate. Then came the voice, crackled and half-whispered through a radio. "Team Alpha in position. Begin sweep. Target is presumed armed but compliant under Phase 1. Target presumed armed. Phase 1, I chuckled. Because what else do you do when the neighborhood watch thinks they're raiding Osama bin Farmer? But the laugh didn't reach my eyes. Something in me had shifted. That old hum returned, the one I hadn't felt since Kandahar. The weight behind the eyes, the coiled breath in the lungs, awareness, training, threat assessment. I moved to the mudroom, slipped on the coat with the emergency light trigger in the pocket. Not because I needed it, but because I wanted to see what happened when they saw me back. They crossed the second fence. Quiet, confident, until one tripped the wire. Click, and then boom. Not an explosion. A flood of light and sound. High-beam floodlights burst on like I'd summoned God with a remote. Sirens screamed from 4 spots. The barn lit up like Times Square. 2 guys dropped flat. One screamed and dove behind the water trough. Another collided with Linda's enclosure. Bad move. Linda rammed him in the thigh, flipped him over, and stared down at him like she expected an explanation. I stepped onto the porch, didn't rush, didn't yell, just sipped my coffee and said, "Good morning, gentlemen. Y'all planning to announce yourselves, or were you hoping for the element of surprise?" Clipboard guy straightened. "We are acting under HOA Emergency Code 7A to seize non-compliant property." Emergency Code 7A. I raised an eyebrow. "Did y'all make that up in a coloring book?" He didn't flinch. "We are empowered by community vote to remove unauthorized structures, reclaim misuse of land, and enforce property value security." "You gonna enforce it with that clipboard?" Another one, shaking, sweating, raised something, looked like a taser. "This is a citizens' enforcement zone," he said, voice cracking. We are within operational bounds. I took one step down from the porch. You're in my yard, armed, threatening seizure of property under fake laws printed on a library computer. Clipboard guy pulled out a folder. This document authorizes us. I snatched it. Half the pages said, draft. One had a coffee stain and what looked like melted cheese stuck to the corner. This looks like it was written by a sleep-deprived 10th grader with control issues. Suddenly, gravel, tires, a car, but not one of theirs, Sheriff Langston. Red and blue lights stuttered down the driveway like divine intervention. Squad car rolled in, slow and loud. The HOA enforcers froze. Clipboard guy turned. Abort. Too late. Langston stepped out, squinting into the chaos. One fake cop was still being screamed at by Linda. Another had buried his face in the dirt like it offered legal protection. Langston looked at me, deadpan. Callahan. What the hell is this? Pre-dawn theater, I said. Opening act. HOA SWAT team. Langston turned to the group. Hands where I can see them. Drop the clipboards, one guy actually said. We're acting under civilian compliance jurisdiction. Langston walked right up, grabbed the badge on his vest, and ripped it clean off. Buddy, this says Compliance Officer, Tier 2. You're lucky it doesn't say Mall Cop. He held up a binder, leather-bound, homemade. The cover, Simmons Valley Compliance Authority Internal Codex. Langston flipped through. Color-coded charts, rank structure, lamination. God help me. Pages labeled violation classes. He read aloud. Class 1 violation, fencing misalignment. Class 2, unauthorized rooster activity. Class 3, hostile resident behavior. He snapped the book shut. I've seen cults with fewer rules, one guy blurted. We were told to enforce protocol. By who? Langston asked. I said it first. Karen. 3 arrests, 2 citations, 1 full report filed with the county investigator. But the kicker, Langston found a list tucked in the binder, a spreadsheet with names, mine highlighted red, obstructionist, high threat, others crossed out. Langston whistled. You know any of these? Yeah, I said. Neighbors, 2 sold out this year. 1 went dark. This isn't just HOA cosplay, he said. This is coordinated, targeted, he sighed. I'll call in a fraud investigator, maybe even the feds. But you should know, Karen's doubling down. She's not quitting, I already knew, because later that night, a certified letter landed in my mailbox. Karen. She was suing me for hostile disruption of a sanctioned community action, for undermining volunteer enforcement personnel, for intentional obstruction of cooperative land reclamation. And the worst part? She had a real lawyer. Someone was funding her. Someone with more reach than a folding table and a clipboard. Tucked inside the envelope was a list of names. Not just mine. Not just neighbors. But one name I knew better than anyone. Someone I'd shared beers with. Who helped build my barn next to their name. A single word. Informant. They say power corrupts. But what nobody tells you is how fast it happens when the only thing standing between someone and total control is a clipboard. Karen didn't fold after the arrests. She didn't back down. She doubled down and dragged the whole damn neighborhood with her. It started with the flyers. Grayscale, clipped to plastic stakes, stabbed into the ground at the road's entrance like military signage. Each had a photo of my property, an aerial shot, probably from a drone, labeled Zone B non-compliant, high risk, bullet points, unauthorized livestock, illegal fencing configuration, documented verbal hostility to enforcement officers. The best part? Subject has refused all attempts at reintegration. Neighbors are advised to avoid unsanctioned contact. She was distributing social exile notices. And the worst part? It worked. Neighbors who used to wave stopped making eye contact. The guy who sold me feed quietly raised his prices. A family from my 4th of July cookout posted in the community group. We support order. We support community standards. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the risk. I stood in my field, staring at a sign about my hostile goats, and realized this wasn't a petty feud anymore. Karen was building a regime. Then she held the rally in her driveway. No chairs, no permits, just a fold-out table, a microphone, and a poster board that read Emergency Compliance Briefing. Tier 3 response. I stood across the street, didn't hide, just watched. At least 15 people showed up. Some looked confused, some scared. A few wore HOA-branded safety vests. Karen tapped the mic. "We're under siege," she said, "and it's coming from within." She held up a flyer with my property's photo. "This resident has refused compliance for 3 consecutive review cycles. He has verbally threatened officers. He has refused dialogue." She pointed at me. "He thinks he's untouchable, but no one is above the rules." She passed out flyers like communion wafers. "He may call it freedom. We call it negligence. We call it disorder," I shouted across the road. "You call a goat screaming at 6 a.m. a security threat." Karen ignored me. Effective immediately. The HOA is initiating a community isolation protocol. Residents are discouraged from contact. No favors, no support, no engagement. The crowd nodded. Some clapped. That's when I realized it wasn't just propaganda. She had followers. Later that night, I found a notice in my mailbox. Not mailed, laminated. Resident classification. Tier 3. Critical non-compliant. Instructions. Remove livestock. Paint barn neutral gray. Attend re-education seminar. Submit apology statement to board. It listed a seminar time and date. Location. Karen's garage. One session was called Silent Fences. How your property speaks for you. I nearly choked. This was Orwell with a polo shirt. It got worse. 2 trail cams went offline the next day. Then a third. The wiring was cut. Langston came out. "You think it's her? She's the only one who knows where I put these." He nodded. "She's not just posturing anymore." That night, a white sedan parked 2 properties down. Didn't move. I watched it through binoculars. Tinted windows. No tags, just idling. I walked toward it with a flashlight. The engine revved and it peeled out. Plates registered to Community Horizon Outreach. Director, Karen. She'd built a shell nonprofit just for surveillance. Then came Max, my border collie, 8 years old, smarter than most people I've worked with. That night, I heard him whimpering near the barn. I found him behind the ATV, shaking, one paw bleeding. He yelped when I touched it. Deep cut, embedded glass. I checked the barn floor. Jagged shards scattered near the rear door. Green-brown glass, purposefully hidden. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just picked him up and whispered, "It's okay. I've got you." Langston arrived 20 minutes later, swept the area, took samples. "This wasn't an accident," he said. "This was a message." And he was right, because I'd reached my line, and Karen had just danced over it. The next day, I went public, uploaded everything. Video of the fake raid, fake seizure warrants, her flyers, Max's injury, surveillance logs, the HOA's law book, laminated re-education guides, caption, "When the HOA thinks they're the FBI, within hours," the video exploded. 300,000 views, comments, shares, messages from rural homeowners who'd seen the same tactics. Within 24 hours, Karen's online defenders vanished. Half her compliance team resigned, but she wasn't done. 2 days later, she showed up at my door. No clipboard, just a manila folder, no smile. "You think this is about goats?" I said nothing. "You think this ends with me?" She stepped forward, voice low. "You've kicked something you don't understand." She handed me the folder and walked away. Inside, printed emails, signed memos, a document labeled Regional Initiative, Rural Behavioral Management, Phase 2, Government Seals, contacts I recognized, people I'd worked with years ago. This wasn't just HOA nonsense. This was federal. The folder didn't just implicate Karen. It exposed something bigger. A plan. A network. My name was listed as primary resistance node. They thought I'd be easy to silence. They forgot who I used to be and what I still am. The folder sat on my kitchen table for 6 hours before I opened it again. Not because I was afraid, but because I knew what it meant. Government headers, agency abbreviations, real formatting, not Karen's UPS store printouts. Top page, Rural Behavioral Management, Phase 2. This wasn't paperwork. It was doctrine. I'd seen it before, overseas, when our job wasn't to fight, but to reshape communities. Post-conflict engagement zones, control through soft power, change the signs, the rules, the way people talk about their neighbors. Now it was here, in a 3-ring binder, carried by a woman whose hobby was code enforcement cosplay. Langston pulled up 2 hours later. I slid the folder across the table. He flipped through, page by page. "Where'd you get this?" "She gave it to me. On purpose. Said I'd kicked something I couldn't stop." Langston closed the folder. Called the county attorney. She arrived same day. Tough. Sharp. With an investigator and a portable scanner. They took the folder apart, scanned every page, verified the stamps. She looked at me. "Did you know this program?" "I knew the people who built it." She blinked. "You were in on this?" "No, but I was in the room. The state got involved fast. Within 24 hours, we had a warrant. Karen's name was tied to 5 cases across county lines. False citations, impersonation, financial loss. The goal was land. Push out rural owners. Consolidate properties. Enforce uniform standards through scare tactics and bureaucracy. Karen wasn't the author. She was the test pilot. Langston and 2 agents rolled out the next morning. Warrant in hand, cruiser out front. Dash cam rolling. They knocked. Nothing. Knocked again. Curtain shifted. No answer. Finally, she opened it, wearing that smug smirk. Clipboard in hand, like it had diplomatic immunity. "Do you have a warrant?" Langston held it up. She didn't flinch. "You're making a mistake." "You first," he said. Stepping inside, the search started in her study. Books, maps, a fake HOA ledger. Then the real find. Behind a false panel in the bookshelf, a narrow doorway, no knob, just a sliding latch. Inside, a back office, surgical, wall-to-wall binders, a whiteboard with names and faces, maps, schedules, rotation charts, a bank of monitors, all turned off. 3 had paused camera feeds. 1 showed my barn. 6 labeled binders, resident tier guide, compliance scripts, corrective language index, psychological reinforcement tactics, asset conversion model, phase 3 strategy outline. Langston flipped through the first. Files on me, my name, property layout, habits. You wake up around 4:50 most mornings, feed animals by 6. Occasionally, leave lights on in the front room past midnight. Rarely seen with visitors. Pattern rating? Defiant. Autonomous? Vigilant? Langston looked at me. They were profiling you. Not just me, 6 other names. All categorized. Compliant, exit achieved, pending disruption. The last one, she'd moved out last month. They found a wall map. 3 counties. Red pins, blue pins, black pins, each coded. P1, probationary. P2, persuasion. P3, physical relocation. Encouraged, Langston stepped back. This isn't HOA. This is psychological warfare. We bagged everything. The attorney filed charges that afternoon. Criminal harassment, wire fraud, identity manipulation, illegal surveillance, impersonating a public official, conspiracy to defraud. Karen's lawyer tried to spin it as a community experiment in grassroots cohesion. Langston called it what it was, a cult with a mailing list. That night, someone knocked at my gate. Jerry, the neighbor who'd stopped waving. He looked broken. I didn't know it would go this far. You believed her? He didn't answer, just looked at the dirt. She told us if we didn't help enforce it, we'd be next. I nodded once, closed the gate. 2 days later, the county cracked the last hard drive, files on 6 other properties, drone footage, fencing audits, voice recordings from porch conversations. They didn't just want your land. They wanted to watch you, predict you, control you, then erase you. Karen wasn't the only node. One signature on the Phase 2 proposal was an old intel officer. Retired, last seen consulting in D.C., I stared at it, not shocked. But knowing what kind of people they were and what they'd do to keep their blueprint from unraveling. One last drive was labeled Phase 4, Contingency, locked, encrypted. But the title said enough. Phase 3 was about control. Phase 4 meant they were ready for resistance. They came again at 4:12 a.m. A drone, faster, smaller, smarter, swept low across the barn roof, buzzed the tree line, and disappeared. 15 minutes later, I found a circle burned into the ground near the north fence, perfectly symmetrical. Black paint, 2 slash lines like an X, the same symbol on the Clearwater property, used on non-compliant targets. It wasn't a warning. It was a marking. They didn't knock, didn't call, didn't send another flyer. They just walked in. 3 of them. No headlights, no vehicle in sight. I spotted them on the southwest cam. Thermal signatures showed they'd been in the woods for 20 minutes. Now they approached my driveway. Black vests. Boots, walkie-talkies muted. One held a clipboard. The other 2 had rifles. Real ones, tightly slung. I didn't panic. Shut the laptop, locked the barn, walked to the porch, watched them, didn't speak. Clipboard guy stepped forward. "We're here for seizure protocol." "You think this is legal?" I asked. He didn't blink. "You've failed to comply with re-education notices. Your vehicle and property are forfeitable under Emergency Clause B9. He held up a page like it meant something. "You've been designated as a primary resistance node." The man to his right twitched, kept glancing at the trees, adjusting his grip. The one on the left, too calm, eyes glassy, focused on the door behind me. "You're outnumbered," clipboard guy said. "Don't make this hard." I stepped forward. "Tell me something. Who trained you?" He hesitated. That's when I knew they weren't real. Not law, not military believers. They took another step. I stepped back, tapped the silent trigger on my watch. Steel barriers rose from the driveway with a low hiss. Motion sensors pinged, floodlights engaged, strobing red. Disorienting, clipboard guy shielded his eyes. Twitchy guy raised his rifle. His mistake. My deck rig kicked in. 2 flashbangs deployed, no shrapnel, just pressure and sound, loud enough to reset your brain for 30 seconds. They dropped. I moved under the side stair, rolled right, hit the failsafe line I hadn't tested in 2 years. A buried cable for an old theft deterrent system. 4 directional sirens fired up, piercing, oscillating, bouncing off the barn to scatter echoes. Twitchy guy staggered. Rifle half raised, blind. I closed the distance, grabbed the barrel, twisted, drove his shoulder into the gravel. He didn't fight. The calm one turned to run, but stopped cold. Langston's cruiser arrived. No siren, no lights, just his voice. "Weapons down now." He stepped out. Sidearm drawn, back up behind him. Real law. Real response. Clipboard guy reached for something. Langston fired a warning shot into the dirt between his boots. He froze. I said now. They dropped their weapons. 4 more emerged from the woods. Hands raised. 7 in total. Armed. Trained poorly, but dangerous. Langston cuffed the first one. Turned to me. They said they were part of something bigger. I nodded. They're not bluffing. Karen, her playbook, her followers. Langston held up a badge from a vest. Enforcement Tier 1, Phase 4. Certified. You know what that means? I do now. At the station, they processed all 7. Most wouldn't talk, but the quiet one did. Before they loaded him into the cruiser, he looked at me through the bars, smiled. Phase 4 isn't about you. I didn't speak. You think it ends here? You think this was about land? It's about pattern disruption. You're not the enemy. You're the prototype. Then he winked. And they took him away. We found more. Forged IDs, maps, training schedules. One had a printed citizen's arrest card, a group photo, 10 people in vests, fake patches, Karen in the middle, titled Phase 4, Ground Team Unit 7, which meant there were at least 6 more. Langston and I stood on the porch later that night, Max at my feet. The air hadn't shifted. You think they'll come again? He asked. They won't stop, I said. Not until this goes public or I disappear. He looked at me sideways. You have a plan? I nodded toward the last uncracked drive on my table. It's labeled with my name. You gonna open it? Not yet. What are you waiting for? I looked across the field. Leverage. The last drive didn't come with a label. Just my name, Callahan, sharpied in block letters. No logo, no date, no context. It sat on my kitchen table for 4 days. Not because I was scared, but because once I opened it, there'd be no going back. Langston offered to run it through evidence systems. I said no. If they'd spent this much time watching me, they deserved to see me watching back. When I clicked it open, the screen flashed. Then a logo appeared. OPRM, Operational Rural Management. Not HOA, not county, not Karen, federal, a program I hadn't heard mentioned in a decade. I knew the name because I'd helped write part of it, 12 years ago. I'd submitted a report on weaknesses in rural command structures, suggesting techniques for post-instability recalibration. They hadn't just used my report. They'd built this framework from it. The drive held 4 folders. Phase 1, Infiltration. Phase 2, Conditioning. Phase 3, Pressure. Phase 4, Correction. Inside, me, drone footage, porch cams, audio from the barn, conversations with Langston, every file labeled. Subject, Callahan. Classification, autonomous, strategic, influence resistant. Then a recording, my own voice, a call from years ago, outlining protocol for managing outlier behavior clusters. They'd weaponized my blueprints against me. Personnel files, Karen's HOA presidency. Funded, promoted, managed, her flyers, committees, compliance task force, all part of a beta rollout under a shell nonprofit. She wasn't the architect. She was the instrument. I wasn't the enemy. I was the test. Then the final file. A video. Karen, clean, calm, smiling like it was a church announcement. If you're watching this, you saw the truth. I didn't start this, but I believed in it. Still do. People like you don't obey. You disrupt. That's why we needed you. You showed us what resistance looks like and how to break it. She smiled, and the screen cut to black. I sat in silence. Not because I was broken, but because I was steady. Langston showed up an hour later. You opened it? I nodded. How bad? Bad enough. He waited. What now? I ended. I didn't go to the press. I went to the source, filed a federal whistleblower complaint, redacted the neighbors, named the contractors, attached every file, then I hit publish. The story went wide. Former employees came forward. Oversight hearings opened. Karen was indicted again. This time on federal charges. OPRM was officially decommissioned, but paperwork doesn't stop ideology. Things are quiet now. Max still limps but runs. The barn holds. The goats yell. The fences stay up. But the weight, it doesn't leave. Max growls when a truck slows at the gate. It never stops, but it pauses. I get messages from strangers. It started here. 2. They called it a volunteer coalition. The documents looked real. We thought we were the only ones. I always say the same thing. Don't wait for someone else to fight your battle. If they've drawn the map, you're already on it. One final email was buried in the drive. Encrypted. Hidden. We cracked it. No body. No signature, just a subject line. Reassignment. Pilot zone. Midwest Beta. Coordinates. Not Simmons Valley. Somewhere colder, flatter, easier to disappear. Phase 4 didn't end here. It just moved down the list. They thought I was the variable, the disruption, the glitch. But I wasn't. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for interesting stories.